Greetings everyone, welcome to Dark Souls 2. My name is Alarian and this is the fourth video in the playthrough portion of the Safer Souls series. In the last video we completed the first portion of the Forest of Fallen Giants and took on the last giant, the first boss that we've met in this game. And as you can see, we've leveled up a little bit from the souls we got there. Our strength's now at 17, so we gained about 3 levels from him. And in this video we're going to be talking about cooperation, or Jolly Co-op as it's called from Dark Souls 1. And the reason for that is, before I move deeper into the dungeon to take on the Pursuer, I really want to give myself the best chance to do that. So I'd like to make a few more levels, and I'd like to get some extra souls so that I can use those to buff up my equipment a bit. It is a fight that is considered fairly difficult by much of the Dark Souls community. As you can see in my first video, he's really not that bad, but I don't want to have to fight him more than one time. So I want to beef myself up quite a bit before I do that. And one of the ways that you can do that easily is through cooperative play. And in order to do that, what typically you can do, as you can see, I just left the bonfire and there were a bunch of white soapstone signs around, is set down your soapstone and get summoned. And what that'll do is put you into another play. Trying to hit somebody at close range with a crossbow does not work. Anyway, what that'll do is that'll summon you into somebody else's game as a white phantom, and you will be able to help them clear their dungeon. Now, you can do this at pretty much any point in most dungeons and get summoned, and a lot of dungeons will have sort of mini objectives, rooms that once you've cleared them, they may desummon you, or they may allow you to help the player clear pretty much the entire area. However, I personally tend to prefer just doing boss fights. So the way to do that is to go to the area right before the fog gate prior to a boss fight that you want to get summoned for, and to drop your white soapstone there. And you can see here there's Mild-Mannered Pates on the right, and there's a couple others from other players there, and I'm going to drop mine right here. And when I do that, mine's going to disappear. Now, I am available for any player who's within soul memory range of me to summon me in at this point right before the Fallen Giant, and I'll be able to help them with their boss. Now, what do I get for doing that? Well, you get a portion of souls if you survive the encounter, you win it, and the player survives the encounter. So in order to get any reward for being summoned, both you and the player who summoned you have to survive. And that brings up the question of, really, what's your role in a boss fight, or in a cooperative summon? And your first role is to support and keep the summoner alive. Okay? Generally, you should look at it as you're there to help them in their game, and you should try and aggressively protect them and attack their enemies. But you should also make sure to keep yourself alive when you're fighting in somebody else's area, because if you die, again, you don't get anything for it. Now, if you were summoned in an early part of the dungeon and you help them kill some random enemies, yes, you'll get potential drops, and you will definitely get souls for those. But if you're there for the boss, you have to survive the boss fight in order to get the souls for it. So as you can see here, I went out and I ran around to clear out some enemies just to get some extra souls, and now I'm being summoned in. And I have appeared in the world of Mr. Rod Spinner, which I'm not sure if that's meant to be offensive or not, but we'll go with it. And one of the first things I'm going to do is I'm going to use a friendly gesture, and that was not the one I intended. Normally that's where I have my wave. Just to let the person know I'm there. And that's kind of tradition. Generally, when you summon someone in, or you get summoned in by someone, we usually use the gesture system, which you access by the select button on your gamepad. And that really is something that the person who's being summoned, the Phantom, should always do, just to let the person who summoned you know that you are there at the keyboard. It's not, unfortunately, terribly uncommon to summon someone in who has been AFK, and then your summon is just standing there. Now, the way summoning for bosses works is you can summon up to 2 players at a time, or 2 NPCs at a time, or 1-on-1. However, that does have an effect on the boss fight, and it's important to keep that in mind. One of the reasons that you need to try and stay alive is that when the boss, or when players are summoned in to the boss to help, they actually buff the boss up. So if you summon one player into a fight, the boss will actually gain, I believe, 50% extra health, and sometimes their actual damage and aggressiveness will change because there are players who have been added to the fight. Now, if you summon 2 people in, I think it goes up to 100% health. So bosses get a pretty substantial buff if you summon people in, and the going wisdom in Dark Souls 1 was generally you wanted to try and take most bosses solo, because it actually made some of the boss fights a lot harder if you summoned other players in to help you. However, in Dark Souls 2, a lot of these fights seem to be more tuned towards the expectation that players or NPCs are going to be summoned into the fights, and so generally it's not a bad idea. There are very few fights in Dark Souls 1 that I would say summoning is actually an actively bad idea. But you do want to stay alive, and you do want to pay attention to the enemy and to the person who's being summoned. If they're taking a lot of damage, then you're going to want to get in there and actively try and get aggressiveness or aggro from the enemy. And if you're taking damage, then you're going to want to get out and heal. And you can see there I made 2,500 souls for that, which is, I think, about a third of what you actually get for killing him the first time on your own in your world. But it's still a pretty decent amount of souls, so I got something out of it. I also got an item called a Token of Fidelity, which I can use later to join the Blue Sentinels Covenant and to take part in some of its activities later. Now, one thing to note is that when you are summoned out of your world, and you'll notice I've sped up the gameplay away from the summons, when you're summoned away from your world, when you go back to it, you'll reappear in the exact spot you left. And any enemies that were alive will also reappear where they left. So if you're being summoned, it's in your best interest to get away from any enemies that you're currently fighting, if you happen to be. Alright, so I'm going to drop my soapstone again. I would like to get summoned at least one more time for this video, and then I'm going to go out and keep working on killing a few enemies. And you'll see here that I'm going to go around and clear out the area just for the souls, and I am going to rest at the bonfire. And that's one thing you can do in Dark Souls 2 as opposed to Dark Souls 1, is you can rest at bonfires, and your soapstone will stay so long as you don't leave the general area. Let's clear out some of these enemies. Alright, so is there anything else you really need to know about summoning and summoning in general? And the answer is probably not. As long as you are getting into the fight and you are staying safe, and you're not getting yourself killed, and not getting your and aggressively trying to help your summoner, then you're on the right track. Now, again, I will say it is important to remember the boss mechanics, the health that they gain, the aggressiveness that they can gain from having summons in the fight. And that's because if you manage to get yourself killed really early, then what you end up doing is leaving somebody who summoned you in with a buffed up boss, potentially without any help. And that's a really frustrating situation. So you don't want to be really gung-ho and obnoxious when you go into a fight as a summoned phantom, because it's very possible for you to screw over the person who summoned you in if you get yourself killed in a silly manner. Alright, so I'm using this time right now to just kind of practice. This is a good time in the game where I've got some aggressive enemies, ones who have special abilities or who can use things like guard breaks, or I can use guard breaks on because they turtle, to try and practice those skills. Again, there's no reason to waste the souls that are here. Now, normally what I might do in my game is just sort of hang out in front of the boss fog wall, waiting for my soapstone to or waiting for somebody to summon me at my soapstone. But since I'm trying to buff up for the Pursuer, I'm going to use this time to get some practice in. And I recommend taking the time to do that too. Now, if you don't want to go run around while you're waiting to be summoned, one thing you can do is if you're in an area with a lot of ambient sound, you can always Alt-Tab out of the game and mess around in something else. And as soon as you hear that ambient sound just disappear, what that means is you've gone into a loading screen. So it can be your indicator of, okay, it's time to Alt-Tab back into the game and get ready for the fight. And that's something that I do quite a bit. Alright, so we're going to continue killing a few of these guys. Now, how long should you wait for a summon? You notice it's taking me a while to get one here. And that's actually a good question. And it may be that if you're not getting summons as quickly as you would like, then you may not have the right soul memory for that area. You may be too high for it, typically, and people just aren't able to see your soapstone. So if you've been summoned at an area a few times and then all of a sudden you're just not getting anything, and maybe it's still prime time and you're getting a little suspicious of why it's taking so long, it's probably a good indication that this area is no longer good for you to get summons in, so you probably want to move on to another area. Typically what I would go for is somewhere between 5 and 10 minutes, especially in these first areas. Forest of Fallen Giants is not a very fast summon area. Some of the later locations, like Hyde's Tower of Flame, which is the dungeon that you're probably going to go to immediately after this, that place has a lot of fast summons. So here I would give it maybe 10 minutes. At Hyde's Tower, I would give it less than 5, frankly. Alright, so now we're in the world of name unavailable, because apparently it's all very offensive. I'm guessing his name is Hot Ass Bitch, probably. And interestingly enough, you'll see that anytime you get summoned or somebody's summoned into your world or invades you, the letters H and O are always bleeped out, because apparently that's always bad, according to the language filter. Alright, so here I am on my second summon. We've made about 3,700 souls or so. I don't know. 2,700 souls since we've been here. So it's not bad for the short amount of time we put into it. And if we get through this boss fight, that's going to be another 2,500. And we are going to get through this one. So I'll just let you know now what we're going to be doing once this fight's down. I'm actually going to stick around doing this for another 15 minutes or so in my playthrough. And it's the only part of my playthrough that I didn't tape, because I figured once we got this information out, you didn't need to see me standing around getting summoned a couple of more times. So I'm going to keep running around killing enemies, just practicing, and I'm going to get 2 more summons off. So there's going to be about 5,000 souls difference between where I end this video and where I start the next video. And that's pretty much the only thing you won't see on my playthrough towards the Pursuer. Alright, so bow to our summoner for having defeated his enemy. Alright, we're going to get desummoned, which is going to put us back to where we were with that one Spear Knight. So I got to make sure I remember that I could end up fighting him. And then after that, I'm going to head it back to Majula. I might use these... Yeah, I think I'll probably use these souls now. And then I'm going to come back for another 15 to 20 minutes, get summoned a couple of more times. And then in the next video, what we're going to talk about is buffing up our equipment. You notice we're still at our base Estus Flask. We haven't buffed up our mace or shield yet. And I'm going to do that in the next video. It's only going to take 10 minutes, but you're going to see how much we can gain in order to, or how quickly we can gain a lot of levels on those items and really strengthen the character before we go on to the final boss of this zone. Alright, so over to the Emerald Herald.
Bear, seek, lest this...
And I think this is going to get us 3 more levels. Yeah, it looks like it is. So we'll put that in Strength, because 20 is a great place to be at Strength at this point. Or are we going to put it in Strength? No, I'm not. Alright, we're going to round out some of our other abilities. Alright. That's it for Jolly Co-op for today. As always, I hope this video helps, and I hope to see you in the next video.